those opportunities come along every 10 years or so, but it's just money doesn't give you any real skills. And so what's going to happen if you have $100 million and no skills? Not a lot. You can maybe buy some nice things. You can also spend it. You don't know how to assess risk. You don't really get anything out of that. These once in a lifetime opportunities to print money, but it's just money.
Yeah.
That stuff doesn't really matter.
Welcome to the Cash Flow Fight Club podcast, in the Champions Corner edition. I'm Mike Deaton, and together with Lygia, my co-host in life, business, and this podcast, we're taking you into the training room, deep in the dojo, sharing the secrets of what it takes to forge a champion. We're going to dig deep into mindset mastery, high performance habits, best-in-class behaviors, and get you the tips and techniques that maximize human potential, all brought to you from some of the best in the business. So grab your buds and your seat, hit subscribe, and get ready to up your game. Let's do the show.
Let's do it.
Today, we're super excited to be in the Champions Corner with Hunter Thompson. Hunter hails from the world of real estate investing and capital raising. He has a knockout book on the subject, Raising Capital for Real Estate. It's a must read. He hosts his own heavyweight podcast, Cash Flow Connections, and coaches thousands of aspiring and successful capital raisers through his private mastermind group, RaiseMasters. Hunter also manages tens of millions of commercial real estate investment dollars as the managing principal of ASIM Capital, and is a world-class public figure widely seen across social platforms and speaks at dozens of events yearly. Welcome to the show, Hunter.
Honored to be on. Thanks again.
Yeah, you bet. So like we were talking about today, what we really want to dig into is just the mindset of a champion, what it takes to be successful, how you see other people, behaviors, values, all that kind of good stuff. And so we're excited to dig in from your perspective and kind of see how things go.
Totally. This will be an interesting conversation. So I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Yeah, I love this. I'm a personal development junkie myself, so it's good stuff. So Lygia and I listened to your audiobook version of Raising Capital. And it's been, 3 or 4 years ago, I guess, since we listened to that. So we're a little bit familiar with your background and where you come from and what brought you to real estate. But why don't you share some of that with our audience, just so they get a feel for kind of where you're coming from and how you got to where you are?
Yeah, sure. So I guess, my story, when I was very, very young, I was very called towards the entrepreneurial type of thing. My teachers would always say that I was marching to the beat of my own drum. That was kind of like the reoccurring theme that kept happening.
Yeah.
I lived near a popular concert venue when I was 5, and I kind of understood the supply and demand imbalance thing because I noticed every time there was a concert, there was no parking anywhere. And so I asked my mom, hey, is it okay if I sell some parking spaces like in our driveway for like $5? And that was the first $100 I ever made, was going through that process. And it was a lot of fun. And I remember making it to $100 and being like, we are rich. Like, you know how many toys you can buy with $100?
Yeah, right.
Like in the 90s? Like, you can go do anything you want. And I just thought it was really cool. So that was kind of like my first introduction to kind of entrepreneurial stuff or side hustles. I always was in a band when I was younger. I was always right around 2005 when the poker boom happened, started playing a lot of poker, ended up turning that into a career for a short period of time. Towards 2007, the summer of 2007, I probably played 40 hours a week for about 6 months, and then moved to California to pursue in-person poker, and fell out of love with poker eventually.
Yeah.
But I learned, quite a lot about business. Most importantly, it's possible to learn really complicated things on the internet, because the way that I learned to beat the game of poker, at least at the time, was that I had a coach. It was cardrunners.com, which is where I learned to play. Mm-hmm. Now that's easy to think, like you want to get good at something, you could hire a coach on the internet. But at the time, the difference between 2007 and now, it's a long time in internet years. So that gave me a huge advantage over the competitors, to be able to have a coach, to watch them play, to have them talk through their moves. And so I understood the game at a fairly advanced level. But now, because of the kind of popularization of that, that game is way harder to beat than it was back then,
Yeah.
because everyone knows the way to get good at anything is to find someone that's better than you at that, pay them on the internet to give the information, and then you can shortcut your whole learning curve. And so I was able to take advantage of that arbitrage. And now I'm in part facilitating that in the world of real estate and in particular capital raising.
Yeah, that's a great arbitrage. I love that word. And I was going to mention that just in the 2007 days, if you're in early on that, you could certainly take advantage of those tips and tricks and insights. That's
Totally.
not so mainstream at the time. That's super interesting. So you mentioned moving to LA. So were you not from the Los Angeles area, or?
Yeah, so I was from Tennessee, and I moved to LA really just because I had read that the Commerce Casino was the largest poker room in the world.
Okay.
And so that's why I moved. And
Yeah.
then I ended up, loving LA and the vibe and the fun and the money
Yeah.
and all the things and the speed of the city as well. And so after college, I ended up moving permanently. So that was kind of a summer job before I graduated. And then I graduated and then moved.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, I love the fact that you were introduced to, the joy of earning your own money at such an early age with the, your parking experience. Were either of your parents entrepreneurs, or were they kind of just W-2 mainstream?
I think I get most of this from my grandfather. I've talked about my grandfather's story before on my show. My grandfather was a very successful cotton person in the 70s and the 80s.
Okay.
And if you Google around, you'll be able to find his story, but I'll tell you the brief version right now. He was the owner of the second largest cotton company in the world in the 70s. And before the 80s, went through business bankruptcy, personal bankruptcy, complete implosion, negative $100 million net worth, start from zero. And so that story is what motivated me in part to get into the world of investing, because there's no reason that should have happened. There's no reason that someone should go from Forbes 400 to negative 100 million. Everyone listening to this podcast had more money than him, right? That's crazy, right? So, and that's in, the 70s and the 80s. So that story, which, I'm happy to talk about, but generally speaking, he levered to the moon, invested in a massively volatile asset class, put all his eggs or whatever in one basket, and bet on the futures market of cotton, and it didn't work. And the nature of the loans, the fact that there was only one lender, they called the loan due, about $500 million, by the way, and just crumbled everything immediately.
Oh,
and
wow.
during this process, he was finding different collateral, different trusts, different cars, whatever you could do. And it ended up all imploding, and he lost everything. And I just was thinking, you could have taken a fraction of that and just put it in the S&P 500. And, the miracle of compounding interest would have done some serious work. But, there's a crazy lesson to be learned about ego and leverage and being over allocated to one asset class and all those things. And it's a crazy, crazy story, but it formed my investment thesis, which is the opposite of that. Really recession resistant, defensive, appropriately leveraged, and diversified. It's the opposite of every single thing that he did. And it's nothing against him. I'm very grateful for who he is and what he went through, because we learn. It's easy for me to say that now, but I know like what it would feel like as a business owner from his perspective. He was trying to be the next Rockefeller, and it almost happened. And a couple more months later, it would have happened. If the loan had been extended maybe 3 months later, it would have happened. But that's not the way to do financial planning. You don't want to try to Rockefeller yourself and risk your whole career. So the power of compounding interest is so powerful that you don't have to. You can just kind of slow and steady your way to not only beat inflation, but multi-generational wealth. So that's the game that I'm going to play.
Yeah, there's something about that. Just, as you were talking, the mindset of a driven entrepreneur like that is not such that they play it safe too often. I think, we go through these cycles. I know you've probably read or heard a bit of Ray Dalio and others like him who talk about these macro cycles, and where, like we had the Great Depression. Well, we're now getting to an age where there's almost nobody around who was literally a part of the Great Depression. And so the mindset starts to shift. Our cycles become a little bit shorter, I think, as we, as things digitize and go through booms and busts a little bit faster. And maybe they're not as extreme, which is a good thing. But I think there is a bit of, unless you're personally touched, like you were by your grandfather's story, it's hard to come into things with a structured risk management approach, especially some people that are entrepreneurial bent. I'm not. I kind of came down this mainstream poor dad path, right? Where my mom was a school teacher. She said, my dad, go to school, get a job, feed your 401k. I kind of got into entrepreneurship late in life. And I only did it, quite frankly, because a lot of my risk factors started to peel away. Like my kids were grown. They were out of the house. I didn't necessarily have to have the roof over their head. Lygia and I have a wonderful relationship that is very, open to taking risks. And we have a lot of confidence that no matter what happens, we're going to be okay. And so a lot of those things started to click into place that allowed us to jump into an entrepreneurship venture or 2 or 3 now. But yeah, and so I also have that very risk averse type approach, and I want to make sure that I'm, not over leveraging and we're diversifying and doing things like that. But it is tough. I mean, you see the cryptos and the booms and busts and people that, early adopters and people that get in and enjoy the rise, but then a lot of them can also get wiped out by the fall.
Can I speak to that real quick? So I remember reading about the .com bubbles when I was younger, and always thinking, I bet I would have done really well during that tough, because I just am cut out for it emotionally to deal with the kind of volatility. And as I got older, I realized, I probably would have missed out. And then the crypto thing happened, and I did miss out, and and I'm happy. So, and I'll tell you why. So those opportunities come along every 10 years or so, but it's just, money doesn't give you any real skills. So let's say you do spike one on Dogecoin and you get 100 million, which is like completely insane in terms of the percentages, the likelihood of that happening. Then you have 100 million, but you don't know anything about business. You don't know anything about employees. You don't know anything about inspiring other people. You don't know anything about players. You don't know anything about attracting leads, educating people, building any infrastructure. You don't know really anything. You just have $100 million. And so what's going to happen if you have $100 million and no skills? Not a lot. You can maybe buy some nice things. You can also spend it. You don't know how to assess risk. You don't really get anything out of that. So what ended up happening is that I have a friend that made $1 million in Bitcoin, and I had to sit and be like, I'm going to focus on trying to build a coaching business. And then what happened in the last 3 years? We have a coaching business that, you can do the math. Our clients pay somewhere around 20 grand a year. We've got 400 clients. That's what I built while they watched their portfolio go 1 million, 500,000, 250,000. And the whole time, all they did was have a panic attack while I was learning all of the skills that I just outlined. And that's not to brag. I'm just saying, like, I can only say that now. There was a time when we had no clients, we hadn't launched yet, and he had $1 million in an account that he didn't have before. And it's like, Hunter, duh, I took you out to dinner and I told you this is going to happen. Well, if you feel like you either got burned and you tried to go all in on crypto and now are suffering because of that, that's okay, but don't do it again. There's always going to be these once in a lifetime opportunities to print money, but it's just money. That stuff doesn't really matter.
Yeah, it's like the lottery winners, right? They win big and then they're broke. Athletes, same thing. If they don't have good money managers, which is rare in their industry, then they're also broke. They're just not thinking forward or consistency or long term. So yeah, great story and parable.
100%.
A little bit into my next question. What made you want to invest in real estate? How was your introduction to real estate?
I think the first thing is that the vehicle itself is so favorable for all the reasons all your listeners, I'm sure, are familiar with. The tax depreciation, cash flow, the passive nature, potentially passive nature, the fact that it's simple enough, like someone like myself can understand it, but it's complicated enough and lucrative enough to attract billionaires. That there's a lot of interesting things there that you don't have to know about real estate to just know intuitively there's something to it. It's worth like playing a role in. But the thing that was really pronounced for me was that I was in college when 2008 happened. And it was just the mega go left when people are looking right thing. And part of that is a personality thing that I had early on, but it was the ultimate. Any headline you would read would be tailspin death cycle of foreclosures, and it's never coming back. And that was such a green light for me, just given the fact that people need a home, right? So you can play the go left when people are looking right thing wrong, which is anytime you see negative headlines go the other way. But the incredibly inelastic demand for housing in particular is such that you have the safety net so that there's going to be some demand. If you have time, it's going to come back. Right. That's not necessarily the case for, let's say, something even like Bitcoin, where there is a lot of demand, but certainly not for Dogecoin, right? So that was the first entrance. The second was that I was very focused on financial markets through 2008 because of just, it was an interesting thing. Went into the world of investing, but didn't know where to invest, whether it's stocks, bonds, mutual funds, real estate, venture capital. And then 2010 happened and my whole world shook, which was the European debt crisis. And I've talked about this many times in my show, but it was like, I read all the Charlie Munger books. I read all the Warren Buffett books. I was on CNBC all day listening to Jim Cramer. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, all the research I did, the Greece bond yields and the German bond yields are the only thing that actually mattered. Like, what? Like, you're telling me this multi-trillion-dollar casino now comes down to this one figure that I had never heard about mattering? And how could it possibly? Why is Apple stock determined by whether or not the Greece bond yield hit 7%? I was like, this is just a game. This is a game, and it's too complicated. It's too complicated for a small company to even joke around to say that we have an advantage over the market. So it sent me on a path to kind of uncover how to produce cash flow with infrastructure that is really simple. And I was happy to do anything, but real estate's just really well set up for that.
Yeah, it is. It's a tangible asset with a lot of the benefits you highlight. It's also understandable at a very simplistic level versus things like the markets where there are so many intangible factors that are it's almost impossible to arbitrage something like that, right? There are people that do it for a business. They're so at it. They have some hits and have some misses, but to be able to do it or not, that's at least up until now, it's been an impossible task. I would argue that I think we're entering into an era where computing power starts to catch up, and people that have the means will be able to do a lot of that and figure out the behavior system of the markets and capitalize even more so on it, which is kind of a scary thought. And even more reason why individuals or small companies, like you said, really have no business picking the winners and losers or trying to in those businesses. So
for sure.
Yeah, interesting. So you got into real estate out of some opportunities and some more realism. Tell us a little bit about your starting point in that market or in that industry to where you are now, right? So I'm assuming here, I don't know if that's the case, but I'm assuming you kind of started out as a solopreneur, raising capital out there, shaking the trees and knocking on doors for investments. And fast forward to now, you have more resources at your disposal to do that. Kind of what was that growth and that arc like for you?
Totally. So I'll kind of circle back to my grandfather's story. So that complete implosion happened. He levered to the moon every piece of collateral that he could, and then a lot of collateral that he couldn't was attached to that. And so in the wake of that, there was all these lawsuits, and my mother and her brothers and sisters got a little fraction of a percent of what he had created, tiny little fraction. And over the years, the S&P 500 has done great things. So that little fraction turns into something that, has allowed me to have a comfortable life. I didn't grow up this isn't a rags to riches story. It's definitely not a private jet story or anything like that. But just, I got to go to whatever college I wanted to without money being part of the discussion, basically. So my number one goal was to help my mom get money out of the stock market. That was the first mission for me as an entrepreneur. I was like, I want to help my mom get money out of the stock market and get into predictable cash flowing assets. And so the first investments I made were kind of as a quasi passive investor. And I eventually created a fund of funds to help her and other people invest. And I started bringing on friends and family, mostly friends, by the way. My family wouldn't invest with me.
It's a good thing, actually. We started that way as well. And a lot of our family didn't. And we are so happy now that they didn't, because it just complicates things too much.
It does. Let me give a shout out to the people that are just getting started, though. So when you get started, you want your friends and family to help you because there's no one else that will.
Sure.
And so if you've got friends and family that have the balance sheet and the stomach for it, then okay, you'll accept their $25,000 because you want to get from 0 to 1. But you'll quickly realize, while so many of them were against it, and while you will be too shortly. But I get it. When you're getting started, you're like, I'll take anything. Right? You'll make a deal with the devil because you got to show something to get anyone that's not a friend and family member. So it's a balancing act. I will say, my wife is pregnant right now as of the recording of this. We're going to have
congratulations. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I would think that I would probably invest with my son if he had a good business plan. And I was going to think that maybe the money would probably go to 0 because I want him to kind of get from 0 to 1. You know what I mean? But I wouldn't want it's a balancing act, but I will have the balance sheet and I will have the stomach for it.
Exactly.
If you get in a friend and family member that has neither, or at least is missing one, it's going to be a really negative experience. So it's just something to think about. And that's just my strategy. Other parents will take different strategies, but it's just, I thought a lot about that. And I was very grateful that my mom wanted to invest with me because I wanted to help her. So just something to contemplate internally. So I created this fund of funds structure and I started investing in other people's deals. And the way that I did this was I would identify someone that I would believe to be best in class in their particular niche.
Mm-hmm.
And they wouldn't allow me to be a partner. I had no real background in the business. And many of them had $100 million under management or more. And so all I would do is say, hey, look, your deal right now is a 7% preferred return with a 70-30 split. If I invest $1 million with you, would you give me a higher preferred return and a higher split? And they would usually say yes. I don't got to convince them about my background. They don't even think I'm trustworthy. I don't even want voting rights. I'm just saying, if I show up on your doorstep with $1 million, will you give me a slightly better deal than those who are investing 50K?
Yeah.
And many would say yes. And then what I would do is pull investors together, get to that $1 million mark, invest with them, and basically just keep the difference. So my investors would get the same deal as if they had invested directly. And I would make somewhere around like 1.5 or 2 points annualized every single year over the 5 or 10 year period. And that's how I started my career, with no track record, no background. I was never even the guy. I was never claiming to be the guy. I would say, I found this amazing guy and this is his track record.
Yeah.
And so I kind of circumvented a lot of questions around that until I had built a track record of my own.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. So now that's kind of a little bit more where you are, at least on the capital side of things. I guess you're partnering with people, but also out there looking for your own deals. Is that?
That's right. So we have been focused on the capital placement side of the business for about 10 years. And just recently, we are now going to be vertically integrated and are buying our own deals directly and controlling the entire experience. And this is just a result of learning more about business, having more confidence, having a bigger ability to raise capital, having a larger reputation, all those things, which I'm happy to go through. Is a big decision. And I didn't want to do it, but now I realize I have to. But now we're going to be only doing deals directly and not raising capital for other people. So, but that's a relatively recent thing. Part of it has to do with the market dynamics. The deals that we're seeing right now, and we're just only buying deals in Phoenix, it's the best deals we've seen in 5 years.
Yeah.
And the moment there's a hesitation in a hyper competitive market like that, it's like, now's the time. Every broker wants to talk to you. Everyone wants to do business with you. It's difficult to raise money, but the deals we'll do right now, I promise you, will be the best we've done in a long time and will do for a long time.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think this is something we did want to discuss a bit. It's been a crazy 3 years or so with the start of COVID, and then now there's rates hopping around, or not? They're not hopping around; they're going up. Inflation, as well as some banking crisis here now, and so yeah, I do think at the start of COVID there was a lot of talk in the industry about now is the moment. Where it's our 2008 moment. All these great deals are going to be coming. It obviously went a different way, I think, than most people were thinking. But I think the prevailing thoughts now are that there'll be a lot of distressed assets in the market. It's just inevitable. It's already starting to happen, right? The spread between buyers and sellers has gone pretty much away now. So you start to see deals like you're talking about, and obviously, you touch on an important point that it is very much market to market dependent, if not submarket to submarket dependent. You really need to know your market and the underlying fundamentals of it, and how it's going to behave in the short term here. But yeah, there are going to be some great deals, and being vertically integrated, if you can do it, is a great thing to do, because you can be more nimble and you can capitalize on things, and you can control a little bit more of the fundamentals of a deal, rather than having to rely on a lot of others. But do you, in that regard, and in just in general, are you actively thinking about the potential turbulence and variations and different strategies with different approaches, or when different market conditions arise, so that you're prepared to capitalize on those types of situations?
Yeah. So I'll be honest with you. So number one, I am an entrepreneur first, not a passive investor. And I spent far too much of my career in the investment world thinking like a passive investor, meaning working my butt off for 15% IRR like a normal passive investor.
Yeah.
That's not how, like, if you're a passive investor, if you're a high income earning doctor, lawyer, accountant, these types of professions, the best way to make money is to be the best accountant you can be, and to then just shovel money passively into these great deals.
Yeah.
But don't confuse yourself. It's passive for a reason. So I would find, and this is just not legal advice or financial advice, but I would find 5 groups that no matter what happens, they're not going to commit fraud, and you believe in their investment thesis, and go all in and just put $100,000 with them every single time they put out a deal.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that is honestly the way that I think passive investors should be playing this game. I don't think, number one, flying around the country, looking at different asset classes, learning all these things, I don't think trying to invest $10,000 per deal is good for you to do. You get hyper diversified. You care about nothing. You have to get 1 million K1s every year. It's just that's not the life you should live. Now, as a business owner myself, I don't want a 15% IRR. That's nothing to me, because I'm working my butt off. It's passive for a reason. The returns are reflective in that.
Right.
So if I want to invest $100,000, it's likely in an employee that should produce 100% IRR annually on that money.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that part. In the world of entrepreneurship and business ownership, you want to be hyper specialized and localized, which is why I think you should have 5 people you invest with, not 1, because I only want to draw a circle around Phoenix and buy all the assets there. And I can be better than someone else by doing that. I will not be able to be better than someone else at self-storage, multifamily, mobile home parks, assisted living in all different countries and regions. That's not going to give me strategic advantage, market dynamic, favorable market economics, vertical integration, economies of scale. These are things that are really material, but the most important is control. I do not want to, and I've never heard a billionaire say, I made all my money deferring to this third party I don't control.
Right.
So that is a good strategy for kind of wealth preservation as a passive investor. But if we're going to raise $50 million in 2023, we don't want to just go, okay, welcome this person I met. Good luck. And just hope they do the right thing. Because we found that they will never do what we will do. They may do better or worse in different areas, but they will never do the exact same thing. At a certain point, we need to control that. That's us as a business owner. As a passive investor, it's a whole different situation.
Yeah, we started out in a little different asset class. We started doing land, buying and selling vacant land as our first foray into real estate. But when we diversified into commercial assets and multifamily in particular, our first couple of deals, we were just hungry to get into a deal, and found our way into some deals and into being general partners. But that was our first and biggest, and still our ultimate takeaway is, you're entering into a partnership with people. And I also am a bit of a control freak. I mean, I definitely want to control the asset and the decision making and do things like that. But it is super important, especially as a passive investor, when you're handing over funds to someone, to understand who that someone is. More so important than the marketing pitch that you're going to get about the deal, right? You need to understand, are they going to lean into difficult times, or are they going to fold and close down, and are they going to communicate openly and transparently? Those kind of things are really crucial when you're putting $100,000 in somebody's hands.
100%.
Cool. So, all right, now you're into a little bit of giving back, right? You have a coaching program, RaiseMasters. Tell us a little bit about, the genesis there. I'm really interested to hear, how is that structured behind the scenes? Like, do you have a team of people working with you? How do you go about selecting and building that team? And maybe some insights into people that successfully go through your program. What are the common threads and themes that you see stand out that listeners can take away if they're, going into an entrepreneurship endeavor or entering a coaching program or something like that?
Cool. Okay. So it's been a while since I've talked about this. So I'll give you kind of the full story. So in 2017, I met a gentleman that reached out to me that wanted to learn about what I did in the world of commercial real estate. His name was Adam Carswell, and he had first won a national championship playing basketball in Belize. And then the next year, I believe, coached a basketball championship in Belize that won the national championship in Belize. It's like, this guy's a winner. Winners like winners. What's up, dude? Yeah. And he wanted to do kind of the same kind of thing that I did, but there was no coaching program that could help him. I didn't trust anybody that, like, in the passive investing space, in the diversified asset class world, there was no program. And so I basically outlined what I thought would be a good program, asked him if he'd pay me $4,000 if I did it for him. And he did. So I created a program, had a bunch of people join, and talked about, the passive approach to being an active investor, fund of funds models and such, and raising capital for other people. And that's how I started my career. And so that was the first coaching program that we had. And, that was almost a 6-figure a year type of coaching business. And it was so cool. It was pretty passive, and I got to meet some great people, and it was awesome. Then I wrote a book called Raising Capital for Real Estate, which it sounds like you went through.
Yeah.
And that book generated a lot of success and a lot of interest. And I could tell that while I did have this other coaching program, it wasn't a perfect tie-in. It was teaching people how to raise money, but then it was insane. And then also, like, learn about real estate. First, you would want to learn about real estate, then learn how to raise money. So what didn't really make sense from like a taking the next rational step standpoint. So I thought about it for a while, and with the help of some coaches and consultants, I retooled and remade a new coaching program called RaiseMasters that was just about raising capital. We had a summit to launch this coaching program, which at the time didn't exist. It was just a PDF drawing of some, cool, like, this ticket that doesn't exist in physical reality, and like all these modules that haven't been recorded yet. And so I did the summit and said, hey, like, sign up here. And our 3-year goal was to have 50 people sign up. Our 2-year goal is to have 35 people sign up. And so I think a month and a half in, we had 35 people sign up. And I was like, oh my gosh, we should focus on this. And it started as a meeting per month with the modules. And then it's now grown to, we have more than 430 members. It's been about 2 years. And it's just been a rocket ship unlike anything I've ever been on. And it was way, way harder than I thought it would be because it was way more successful than I thought. So I was prepared for something emotionally. I was prepared for something financially. And my relationship with my wife, we had one thing in mind. But like as an entrepreneur, if you see fire and you have gasoline, you know what to do, right? You dump it on the fire.
Yeah.
And so I'd be happy to talk about all the things I learned, but it basically, I lived a very out of balance life for the last 2 years and built, a multi-7-figure business, which is amazing. And just recently started to and began to build out the infrastructure capable of, honing something like that and taking it to the next level. To get to 7 figures as an entrepreneur, you can do it if you work hard.
Mm-hmm.
You can. And if you have skill and you're willing to do whatever it takes, you can get to be a 7-figure entrepreneur. Very few people, don't want to come off in the wrong way, but it's way harder than most people think. But it is possible. For anyone that's thinking, I'm trying, well, dude, it is to get to your first 7 figures. It's just pure output and whatever it takes. But to get to 8 figures, it's a very different thing. It is inspiring other people. It is, ensuring your clients have success. It is ensuring that you retain clients, not just like selling your butt off like I did at that summit. Hey, trust me, it's good. It doesn't even exist, but it's good. It actually has to work. You have to have a good reputation. You have to stop negative word of mouth. And you have to have really positive word of mouth. And you have to have people that are willing to do whatever it takes. And so, we're on the trajectory to get to that 8-figure business. And we now have the infrastructure capable of it. But it's a totally different ballgame of 7 figures or 6 figures. And by the way, most entrepreneurs' goals is truly to be able to pay their bills as an entrepreneur. That's 6 figures, right?
Yeah.
You did it. Like, don't misunderstand. You freaking did it. 7 figures is 10 times that. 7 figures is 10 times what the goal is. 8 figures is 100 times what the goal is, right? It's up into the caliber of like, you qualified for the Olympic trials. I think only 0.6% of businesses generate 8 figures. So, but if you can create something that does 8 figures, you don't want to just go to the Olympic trials. You want to win some medals.
Yeah,
and so if you want to do that, you're going to constantly have to learn new skills that are as eye-watering as going from working your butt off to this totally different skill set. And, we haven't hit those numbers yet, but I know from, research and the network and all the things that it's like, you're never going to be like, just, more of the same.
Yeah.
So
yeah, we could certainly sympathize with all that you've said. So when we started in 2016, right at the beginning of 2017, in our entrepreneurship foray, and yes, you can grind and build a 7-figure business, and that's kind of where we are at this cusp of, okay, it's a different animal to go from being the main people in the business and driving it, versus then transitioning into more of a team, of a company, of different things like that. I was thinking about this before the podcast, but from what I understand of your RaiseMasters program, it's a little similar, right? You're giving people systems and processes and tools to up their game to a really high level. I mean, it's very similar in the world of entrepreneurship, right? When you're grinding at it, you kind of know everything, you're juggling, all the balls are in the air and you're able to do it. And then at some point you're not able to do it. You have to start systemizing, putting processes in place, getting the right people in the right seats, and like you said, inspiring to greater action and things like that. So yeah, it's definitely a different ball game.
For sure. The one thing I'll say, that I was speaking to you as entrepreneurs and the audience as entrepreneurs. So I'm talking about from my perspective, but the reality is our clients don't care about that.
Yeah.
Our clients don't care about what revenue numbers we have or how many employees we have. All they care about, in the interim is this a freaking landslide investment? Or is this the kind of thing that's just like everything else? Is this so overwhelmingly good that I will do anything to get my friends in here? Or is this just another BS real estate course?
Right.
And so from top to bottom, we created something with the intentionality of, if someone were to say like, oh, this is nonsense, we would almost be like, oh my gosh, well, first of all, we're so sorry that this happened. Here's your money back first.
Yeah.
Second of all, what can we possibly do? And we have had those conversations, right? Very, very small percentage. But if you
Sure.
scale to 400 and something clients, you're going to get some weird outcomes.
Sure.
But each time we learn a lesson, each time we give our clients the benefit of the doubt. And what that mentality has done is we've just, I mean, you can ask someone about who's number one, but there's only one answer because it's all about them. And it is not the Hunter Thompson show, which I know sometimes I talk like it is. It is totally not, or we wouldn't have any success. It's all about our clients. And so when we have stories come in from people that have, claim that they saved $1 million from something that they learned at our last coaching session, it's like, you think that guy's going to go tell his friends? Like,
oh yeah,
that is a landslide.
Yeah, that's golden right there. Yeah,
totally. And I can go endless, people that have joined that had never raised money that just raised their 10th $1 million, and people that were raising $500,000 now are raising $5 million a year. Oh, endless. You can just Google around. You'll find a lot of that. But it was painstakingly breaking down the capital raising business in the world of content creation to make it hyper scalable. So once someone has their first success, raised their first $500,000, the same infrastructure can raise 5 or 50. And that's what's so great about this business. By the way, if you're interested in learning more about that, you can go to raisingcapital.com.
Love it.
Yes.
Yeah, let's pull on that thread a little bit in terms of success factors and people that do go through your program. What do you see as common characteristics of people that rise to the top and really have that? Outside of there's always going to be a lucky one or two that kind of stumble into a good niche or whatever. But there are some commonalities in character traits and different things. And the flip side of that, those that maybe struggle a little bit more.
Well, man, it's so sad because so much of the stuff you see in like today's quote culture, and I'm only 36, so I'm not like this old person that's like, you kids and your ideas. That's not right. But it just sucks to see perpetuated so much about the things that are literally antithetic to actually living a fulfilling life, let alone a successful life. So like if you go to Tony Robbins, for example, it is literally no one owes you anything. It is all on you and you can totally do it. Those are like the main messages of probably the number one thought leader of success in the world and probably in the history of the world, if we're being honest. But what is taught? Hey, you probably can't do it. Someone else owes you something. And no matter what happens, you're probably not going to make it. So like that, the difference of the cultural implications there, and human beings are so malleable to actually unwind that programming is very, very freaking difficult. But we don't really attract a lot of people that are feeling sorry for themselves. We tend to attract people that are really willing to do whatever it takes. Even within that audience, though, this is a very difficult business, right? It's very lucrative or potentially very lucrative. So you're competing against really savvy people and all this stuff. But the main thing I would say is that coachability is lucrative. And so you'll sometimes find, and I'm sure there's some very intelligent people listening to this show, sometimes you'll find some idiot that is just running circles around you. And that's, by the way, this all of us. You're like, how the heck is this guy successful? This guy or girl, how are they successful? I'm not going to say any names. I'm sure you're all thinking the same people I'm thinking. What is this person doing in the White House? What is this person doing as a billionaire? Whatever. Yeah. And the answer is typically that is in fact exactly what allowed them to do that. They have the blinders on. And if someone goes, that's what you need to do if you have success, they're willing to jump off the mountain as long as the person that they're talking to knows what they're talking about. And that alone is so powerful because what we found is that all these tactics and strategies, this is basically noise. What really matters is the speed of execution because whoever can figure out what's wrong first wins because we're all going to be wrong. No matter what you think, your intuition is just about as good as mine. We're not really that special when it comes to intuition. What really matters is how fast we can make decisions. So if I'm making a decision that will take other people a year, if I can make that decision in a week, I will grow 52 times their growth rate in a year. And that's just 1 year. Think about what's going to happen in 10 years. Yeah. So speed of execution and coachability basically willingness to put the blinders on because the anxiety isn't there. I don't know if Hunter's right. Maybe this isn't going to work. It's not going to work for my niche. If you can just be like, who cares? I may look like an idiot, but I'm going to do my first podcast. That attitude will serve you well.
Yeah, that's a hard thing for some of us to get over. Like I struggle with a bit of perfectionism, and as an entrepreneur, and as I gain more and more experience, it's about realizing that failure is not failure to begin with. It's just feedback. And as you mentioned, if you can get it more quickly and pivot away or into something else, you're golden, right? You just keep advancing. And so that's, I have to work on that near daily, but yeah, it's a good thing. Along those lines, part of your part of the book you wrote, I'm sure it's part of RaiseMasters as a core tenet or whatever, but this thought leadership platform, right? Being out there, establishing credibility and some depth of knowledge in your area of expertise. You practice that, right? You're out there, you're writing books, you're speaking on stages, you're on social media. Is that a natural skill set for you to some degree? Or do you actively work on it?
Well,
it comes through practice, right? I mean, just being out there doing it is one thing, right? That's a big element of it. But just curious.
And watching you, you're great. I mean, it comes out so naturally.
Yeah,
I appreciate that. I want to talk about the perfectionism thing in a second, but I'll answer your question directly. So, I actually just recently spent 6 days with Tony Robbins. I was with a lot of other people. It wasn't a one-on-one thing, but it was a lot of fun. And he asked what your primary question was, and so what the question you've been asking all of your life. I think my primary question is, what can I do to lead them? And so I feel very comfortable doing what I'm doing right now, speaking on stages. The larger the stages, the more comfortable. That's really been my whole life. I used to be in a band. I was always eager to be, before the term influencer had the connotation it has now. What I want to do is figure out something.
Yeah,
say it again.
A front man.
100%.
Yeah.
Whatever I could do to figure out, especially when it comes to knowledge, if I could uncover something that I think will help other people, the last thing I'm going to do is keep it to myself, right? I'm going to have to contain myself, not to share with everyone, including my competitors.
Yeah.
And so my book, you've read it, I tried my best to put a $50,000 coaching program in a book and give it away for $7. I wanted to impact the industry. Now that seems silly. It's a big industry, and I know how crazy that may sound, but man, I had to be a little crazy to think I could. You know what I mean? I had to be like, this industry is kind of solved. Everyone's written a book about the topic. I just think I got my thing to say, and I had to say it. Now, there's this hubris that comes along with that. But without that hubris, why the heck would I work so hard on it? I thought I deserved it. I thought I deserved to be in the position to write the book. So I take motivation from that. It sounds like you may take motivation, Mike, from something slightly different. Like, as an example, if I were to ask you if you're your biggest critic, I think you'd say yes. That's just my guess.
100%. Yeah.
Okay. So sometimes you hear about like Michael Jordan telling his teammates to like almost make up stories about people saying he wasn't that good before big games. Oh man, in the press, and he would use that as fuel. And that you hear that a lot. And maybe, Mike, you may resonate with that, where you're just like, oh, they were doubting me, but here I am. Right? I never did that. Never. In my life, in my athletic career, in all this, I have never thought that negative connotation as fuel. I've always been on the other side of the spectrum. I'm going to say something super cringy, not for the first time for a lot of you, but I'm going to be honest with you. And this hasn't aged well, but I'm just going to be transparent. I'm more in the Kanye West side of things when it comes to thinking I'm about to create something incredible. So I don't want people to say, oh, someone said RaiseMasters is not that good. I want to think I've got to be at a level so high that I can believe it is number one, because that's the only way for me to get the best out of myself. And by the way, if someone were to say something negative about me, it hurts my feelings. It makes me sad for them. It doesn't motivate me. I'm like, that's sad. Yeah. He doesn't want to be my friend. So the cool thing about this is, even though I use the Kanye reference in the wake of all this craziness.
Yeah, right.
What I'm trying to do is make it clear that you have a way to be successful too, no matter where you are in that spectrum. The beauty of capitalism is that we all have a role to play. Your strengths and weaknesses complement someone else's. You don't have to hear those stories about Michael Jordan and be like, I'll never be like Mike because I never was resonating with that. There's someone else out there that has a different perspective. So I'm passionate about this because if you, like, let's say you didn't do well in school, it's so easy to check out and be like, I can't be like that because I didn't do well in school. So what do I say? Hey, I didn't do well in school. True story. By the way, you mentioned, oh, it sounds good. You've got that entrepreneur thing since you were young. Yeah, reality was no one would hire me. But with someone listening can go, me too, bro. And now him and I are together in this and we can go on our path together. And I love that.
Yeah, that's awesome. I resonate very much with the gravitating towards the positive mindset. I've never been a big downer or negative, or it doesn't fuel me in any way really either.
Okay.
To that much, but those are, yeah. To your point, we all do have a drive inside of us, and man, use it if you got it.
Yes, that's right. As long as it brings like a net positive to your life. Yes. There can be things where you're kind of overdoing it and like you're getting results financially, but your marriage sucks. That's not the angle here. But the cool thing is that it's all okay to be yourself. You don't have to lie and say that you also had that story like Michael Jordan and Kobe, by the way. Right. And people, they hear that together and they're like, well, they're the best, so I got to be like that. And it's not true.
Yeah. Leaning a little bit on Tony Robbins, and I'll circle on this in a bit, but definitely story is a huge player in all of our outcomes in life, right? The story we tell ourselves, the story we choose to perceive from whatever's happening to us. Just like you said, people say negative things, you choose to look at it in a certain way rather than, take it as a negative and stuff. So that's super powerful stuff there. Talked about Tony Robbins. You talked about Munger, Buffett, a few others there. Who are any additional mentors, personal coaches you've had, or person, books, whatever, just kind of really lit a fire under you?
So, in terms of marketing and also just building a movement and a community, Russell Brunson, he changed my life basically. .com secrets, expert secrets, and that's really the playbook for. I think they have solved getting to six figures as an entrepreneur. They have made it a lot easier to achieve that goal that so few people know. So if you know who Russell is and you haven't read .com secrets or expert secrets, or even better, if you have and you haven't achieved that goal of being able to pay your bills as an entrepreneur, that's the playbook. That is the playbook. If you've only read it once, read it again. Read it until you achieve that goal of making six figures. Now, the cool thing though is that mentors change as you evolve. If you achieve that goal and you get to a certain point, you're going to need another mentor to teach you systems and operations. And Russell will be open with you about that. And from my perspective, a guy like Alex Hormozy, who is now doing great things on YouTube, he's there to talk about client success and retention and not just selling your butt off to get someone to buy some digital product and the product isn't good. These people are always changing, and it's cool to kind of change your mentors as you grow. I also think I got a lot out of Double Double. Cameron Herold is the author of that one. That book was basically, I tried to model the structure of that book for my book. And so I have to always give him a shout out.
All right, cool. Good stuff.
I think it's a good moment to ask you, you've touched on many things on mindsets and your, the people that you look up to. Well, how do you keep yourself entrepreneurial fit? Do you have any tips? Do you have any practices, daily practices that you do? How do you really keep yourself fit? Because it sounds like you've accomplished so much and you're only 36. And it's fantastic. It's fascinating to hear how much you've come and how long you've come. And it sounds like you have so much going on for you.
Don't say cold plunges.
It's no. So you mean like physically fit, I guess, or like healthy, right?
No. I think she means entrepreneurial fit. Just keep yourself motivated.
Yes.
Performing at a high level. Physical is a part of that as well, obviously. But yeah.
For sure. I mean, the tie-in there is really powerful, I think. So we do have a gym that's like a quasi full CrossFit gym that's at my house. So like that is my answer. Whenever I'm feeling down on myself and I haven't worked out and then I work out, I'm like, what was I thinking? I mean, that should have been the first thing I thought of. So, and I'll just give a little bit more detail there. I also really like to lift low reps. And I think there's something to that, especially for men, but also for women, but it's just more pronounced for men, which is sets of like 3 and 4 and 5 versus typical hypertrophy. So for people that aren't in the know about this, just a quick summary, most people are of the opinion, and there's a lot of science to back this up, that, lifting weights, sets of like 8 and 10 and 12 will create muscular gains, which is true. But if you wanted to train for strength, you would train lower reps, higher weight sets of like 3 and 4 and 5. Now, most of the time, the only people that train sets like that are like powerlifters, but there's a ton of science about why training like that is really important. Heavy squats, heavy deadlift, heavy bench press in particular, you're training your central nervous system. You're putting your body in a fight or flight thing, especially if you put a bar on your back and it's a heavy bar. That kind of training, it does a lot for you chemically and also structurally. And so I want to live a healthy life, but I think lifting heavy is something that should just be incorporated a lot more. Lifting, generally speaking, being in good shape, I think it's just totally underutilized, especially in this country. But if you haven't lifted like a set of 3 in a while, it's a new world.
Yeah, right on. Are you a Huberman fan or Dr. Andy Galpin? Yeah,
for sure. I'm not I haven't listened to every episode, but I listened to a couple, and it sounds like him and I are aligned on a lot of those things.
Yeah, some good science behind all of that. Yeah, that's good stuff. I've always been a big believer in physical fitness and the impact on the mental state there. So it's good
100%.
stuff. That's why we love the mountains of Colorado here. We're out as much as we can.
Love that.
In. Well, hey, I appreciate you being on the show. We're kind of winding down on time here. One last question I'm curious about. You mentioned being a new dad soon. Do you see that fundamentally changing your work attitude and outlook? Or are you kind of gearing up for some changes there other than investing with and I think it's going to be a son.
It is. That's right. So what a trip, right? So I think you have kids as well. So that this is like this, from the people I respect, it's like this wormhole. And it's like, I'm going to go through the wormhole. And like anyone else that's not through the wormhole, it's like, you're not in a position to talk about the wormhole unless you've gone through the wormhole. I'm sympathetic to that. It used to be like, no, bro, I got this. Like, trust me, be the best. I know everything because I'm 20 and I know, but now I know that I don't know. So in all seriousness, I'm anticipating it's going to be really challenging. I'm anticipating it's going to be the best thing that I've been through and that I will ever go through. I'm anticipating that it's going to really make me and my wife, Chrissy, find out what we're made of. This idea of like this crazy tenacity to make the bank account go crazy. You mix that with this like art of like parenting. I do not know how it's going to play out. I truly don't know. I mean, I'd love to do an interview in maybe a year or maybe 3 and figure it out, but those things feel like they may be at odds, but then part of me thinks, and some of the people I respect suggest that they're not at odds, that in fact, they work together in some weird magical way. I don't know. I'm taking 2 weeks off when my wife have her kid, and then I'm going to start slowly working more. I don't know how much I'm going to work. We're going to figure out. I'm not going to lie. I'm super confident I'm going to be a very present father. I'm super confident that I'm also going to sometimes be a little impatient. And I'm confident that there's going to be some uncomfortable moments because that's the nature of trying to accomplish something incredible.
Yeah.
In both ends, be a good father, grow a great business. These are not easy things. So I'll let you know, dude.
Being mindful about it is, I think, the fundamental, success factor there. But if you think about human needs, right? We all have our basic human needs: shelter, safety, love, that kind of stuff. You've got money to cover that. We started off the show talking about the power of compound interest. I'm sure you could take what you have, put it somewhere if you haven't already, and be at least safe over time, right? And then beyond that, it's how much you want to, feed into the family machine and those kind of things versus balancing all that. It works itself out.
Yes, but this is powerful, my friend. I know we're going over on time, but this is powerful. Then what is the justification? Right? Because what it's really about for me is those success stories we were talking about earlier. Yeah. What's the question with that is how much more of that do you want? The answer is infinite. So then how do you meet that with like taking time off? Like it's a very interesting balance. And that's your point.
Yeah. One of the things we try to do is I also coach people at a personal level, and an exercise that we go through is more of a perspective from end of life. And what are the things like an obituary or people at a party that are, recounting stories about you or whatever? What are those things that you want to be really important? They're generally not money driven. They're generally more relationship driven. You want your children to think highly of you, to have had amazing experiences, relationship with your spouse, all those kind of things are really what ground us through life. I mean, the money and the trappings and all of that are great. They fuel some of this if you want it to be, but they can also drag you down if you get, overwhelmed with a drive to make the next number or hit the next hurdle or do the next thing. And so, yeah, I mean, you got to couch all that just a little bit together and find the balance.
Totally.
And the desire to leave a wonderful legacy for your children becomes very powerful. I think.
Love that.
Yeah, that's a whole nother episode in and of itself, right? When you start talking about different philosophies on how much to provide for your children, how much to not provide for your children, the lessons we learn versus what are they going to learn? We're all different, man. And so we all are going to take away something slightly different from the experience of this crazy life.
I'm happy to come back on in a couple of years and talk about it and get your perspective as well.
We'll pencil it in for sure. Let's do it. I'd love to see it.
Cool.
Well, thanks again for the time, the wisdom, and we wish you all the best in business and in fatherhood and all of that. And so, again, thanks for coming on the show and all the best.
Thanks a lot. Can I give a shout out to kind of where people can learn more about me?
Oh, yes, please do. Sorry.
Okay, cool. So if you want to learn more, if you're on the passive investor side of things, you can go to my company, ASYM capital.com. And then if you want to learn more about the capital raising side of things, you can get my book at raisingcapital.com.
Awesome. Thanks for the reminder. And thank you for that.
100%.
Appreciate it.